So I'll tell you a bit about myself, and then I'll tell you what I was going to cover today. However, if there's anything you want to ask, just pop it in the chat or just ask it out. I'm happy to really answer any questions you want to cover. So my name is Rob Netherway. I'm the Flourishing Community Services Manager for Witton Lodge Community Association. And I have been a practicing community development worker for the last 10 years in a number of roles, both paid roles and voluntary roles. So I've worked in several different charities in Birmingham, and I'm also an active citizen in my own community, contributing to local community projects where I live as well. And I absolutely love community work because I think it really has the potential to bring out the best in people. And I think that some of the tools that I've learned in my career are what are the things that can help you to actually ignite that change in people and actually get things done. Coming to Witton Lodge Community Association, I've been working here for around 18 months. We are a community-led organisation that was set up initially to address community needs, to address a crisis that happened in Erdington, really around housing and evictions and things of that nature. Our ethos is really working with and alongside our communities, and that's something that comes throughout everything that we do, that we don't do things to communities, we do things with and alongside them. And we believe that by doing that, you create change that sticks and change that has long-lasting potential in communities we work in. So we do a whole wide range of projects within my team, which is the Flourishing Community Services team. Anything from helping people find work, to setting up a business, to staying well and healthy, to running environmental projects. So there's really wide varying projects. And throughout all of those, we embed this kind of ethos of community-led solutions. Our board and our staff members and our volunteers are predominantly local residents. So all of our directors, except one or two, are local residents who benefit from the organisation as well. So I've already learned a bit about yourself. That's a bit about me. What I was asked to cover today was really talking about asset-based or strengths-based community development, which I'm not sure if they're approaches that I've come across before. But what I'll talk about is my understanding of those principles and how I use those in my role, and why I think those are really valuable approaches to use. I don't have any slides, I'm just going to talk, so it's going to be quite informal, so feel free just to type questions in the chat as I'm talking and I'm happy to pick them up. But I hope that's kind of what you were hoping to hear today, because that's what I was planning to talk about. In my mind, when I think about kind of asset-based community development, really, it's less about whether or not that's your role. I know that we've heard that some of you work in the field, some of you don't, but more about the values, how you incorporate that into your daily work, and how you approach people and situations. And I think really strengths-based kind of working or asset-based working, you can incorporate into any kind of role, whether you work in a community development role or not. So I was going to start by really just talking about a story of what I feel is kind of community development at its best. So I'm going to share a story from the last year at Witton Lodge of some of the things we were involved in response to COVID. Because I really think that what we've learned in the last year is actually when communities come together, they can really find the solutions that they need and address the things that are important to them. So in Erdington, we had quite a proactive response to the needs that we were seeing in communities. I'm sure we've all heard about food distribution and isolation and mental health crises and all sorts of other issues that arose as a result of COVID. We made the decision to stay open as an organisation. So we closed, I believe, for one day, which was the first day of lockdown, and then otherwise we haven't closed a single day since COVID started. We made our centre open to the public, and we really made it a hub for local communities to come to. Of course, we had to adapt our services, and we adapted them in a variety of ways. So our main hall became a food distribution point. We also had volunteers making wellbeing calls to local residents, and we also had a whole programme of online and virtual activities as well. What we saw through that really was actually that of those services, I mean, Witton Lodge is a relatively small organisation. The majority of that work was done by volunteers and by local residents who took it upon themselves to make a difference in their own communities. We had volunteers packing food parcels, we had volunteers doing wellbeing calls, we had volunteers running sessions, we had volunteers driving, and really none of it would have been possible without volunteers. And what we saw was actually, over the course of COVID, we had over 380 volunteers who volunteered across Erdington, not all with Witton Lodge, some of them with some of our partner organisations, but it's actually a huge number of people who really kind of got involved in leading that kind of work in their communities. And I think that happened quite organically. So, as an organisation, we weren't the ones who drove that change. Actually, we supported and facilitated it, but actually we were having people approaching us just saying, I want to do something, but I don't know what I want to do or how I can do that. And I think that's something it's a very rare position to be in for a start. I mean, if you have people just banging down your doors trying to volunteer, it's a really good position to be in. And I think really, our role in that was actually we nurtured that, we gave the support, but actually we didn't do a lot of the doing. It was local residents who really felt passionate about their community. I think our involvement in that really was giving people a place to meet and connect, and that could be virtual as well as physical. So, for example, we had weekly response meetings for all the organisations and partners to meet. Giving support, so that could be money. So, for example, that could be small grants, it could be equipment, it could be gloves and aprons, but it could also be knowledge and information. Some people want to help, but maybe don't know how to help or what the best way to help is. We also did a lot of work to draw on our existing partnerships and helping people to understand what was available in our local community. But most importantly, really, we didn't take over and do it for people. We nurtured people so they could do it for themselves. And I'll just read out a couple of the stats. So over the course of 12 months, from March 20 to March 21, in Erdington, we gave out almost 18,000 food parcels. We had over 30,000 hours of volunteering. We supported over 2,300 residents who were shielding, and we delivered almost 21,000 wellbeing activities. So it's quite astounding, really. And when I say we, I really use we in the most liberal sense, because that's not me. That's predominantly residents who are delivering a lot of that. I think what we learned from that is actually, I suppose starting with the negatives, is actually that people who are already quite marginalised became even more marginalised as a result of COVID. Actually, the people furthest from support were impacted the most, particularly older adults, but also a wide range of other people in our communities. But on the flip side, we also learned that a lot of people can do things a lot themselves with the right support. And actually, with a little bit of a supporting framework around them, residents were able to take control of that and actually do that very quickly. I think the thing that also residents can do very well is that they can respond very quickly. So actually formal systems from likes of kind of the council, etc., and the NHS were significantly slower at responding than residents were. And actually people just were quick and they just did it naturally. And actually they didn't need to respond to formal systems. And I think this is just really a fantastic example of strengths-based practice. Is actually people knew what was needed and they did it. And in this case, it happened quite organically. I think we've seen the biggest probably outpouring of kind of community spirit in certainly in my entire career, if not my life. But I think it's an example of actually, as community organisations, what can we do to nurture that and how can we inspire it in other situations? Because not every situation is going to be a crisis situation where everyone responds. But our role as community development workers is perhaps how do we plant those seeds, how do we nurture, and how do we grow that community spirit? And I think really when that works really well, this is what you see as the outcome of that. So that was kind of just a story to start us off. And I think it's a really good example of strengths-based practice, which I'm going to just touch on next. So to me, I mean, just by show of hands, and could you just wave at me if you've heard of the term asset-based community development before? Is this a new concept, or I see sort of a yes and a maybe? Okay, great. So I'll just start off by telling you kind of my first experience of strengths-based practice. So I think I probably came across this. I mean, the typical term is ABCD, which is asset-based community development, which most people don't have a clue what you mean when you start talking about that. So strengths-based practice is a very good alternative title. So my first experience of this was really probably about 8 or 9 years ago. And where I was working at the time, one of my colleagues said to me, they said, don't do for others what they can do for themselves. And I think in our sector, we deliver services, that's what we do. And I think that concept, it really, that kind of, my colleague who said that to me really made me think, actually, should I be doing this and should I be doing that? Because actually quite often we are doing things to or for people. And that quote's always stuck with me because it's something that makes me think about, actually, is it always the right thing to do things on behalf of other people? And sometimes maybe it is, and often maybe it isn't. And I think what sits behind that, and what I've begun thinking about ever since I kind of heard that quote, was really is it can help to take you on a journey from being someone who delivers a service to someone who believes people have the ability to do it on their own. And I think really us as practitioners can start thinking about how do we do that, and what do we do in our jobs that help people to do things on their own when they can do things on their own. I think when I first came across the concept of asset-based community development, it seemed a little simplistic to me. I mean, just in a nutshell, if you haven't heard of it before, essentially, in a nutshell, asset-based community development is focusing on people's skills, people's talents, what people have, and what are their strengths, rather than looking at the issues and the needs and the problems in their communities. And I think sometimes it seems quite simplistic because obviously as practitioners, of course, we want to look at the good things. Why would we not look at the good things instead of the bad things? But I think there's a lot more to it than just that. So I'm going to read out a couple of quotes of kind of how you might approach community situations based on your approach. So if you were to use what you might call a needs or deficit-based approach, you might hear people saying things like, the problems I need to be fixed are, things will be so much better if, the things that are stopping me are, and the person who's going to solve this for me is. And I think in this kind of thing, I mean, I'm sure we've all come across people who talk to us in that kind of way. And I think really what I take from that is actually, it's very negative. It takes away people's control. People don't have control. It's someone else, an outsider is going to solve the problem for you. Quite often it promotes people being isolated. And really it focuses on the organisations having power. So in a situation of needs-based development, an individual doesn't have power. And they go to someone else. Someone else is going to fix this problem for them. And I think the risk for that is us as practitioners, we become the saviour. We're the only ones who can solve the problem because people don't have the resources to do it themselves. And I think when you hear these kinds of things, to me, it gives me the sense that people might feel they're quite powerless. And it's not really a very nice way to feel. Obviously, the practical implications of this is actually quite often nothing changes. People are stuck in a cycle that they can't break because actually they don't see anything positive. They don't see a solution. They just see it as a cycle of issues that someone else is going to solve for them. And I think where asset-based community development comes into is what happens if you flip it? So what happens if you think instead of, okay, what are the things we need? What if you think about the things you have instead? What is it that we have about ourselves that we can use to solve these kinds of challenges in our lives? What do we have locally to us? What do we have in terms of our own abilities? Who can help us in our own communities? And actually, let me read out another couple of quotes if you would flip this. The kind of things you might hear from, when you've successfully kind of changed things around is maybe someone saying, I'm going to improve my community by, or the skills I have to fix this are, or the things that are important and I value are this. And the people I can work with to change this are, or even my community was at its best when. And I think from that kind of approach, when you've turned someone into that kind of positive future focus approach, is actually people maybe have a bit more hope. People feel a bit more optimistic about things that can be changed. And actually, we're suddenly a bit more connected. What really asset-based development does is help people to have their own power, to have their own choice, to have their own influence, and to really be looking really at what is in their ability, not what is not in their ability. And I think then the conversation shifts that instead of you as a practitioner doing something for someone, what you're doing is supporting them to do something that they have within themselves to do something. And I'll come on to some kind of practical examples of that in a minute. I think the thing that I believe really is that actually when we support people to unlock their strengths and their talents, that actually you're going to create long-lasting change for people. Because actually, they're not going to be coming to you every time something happens. They're going to feel in a position where they've got power to do something themselves. And I think really as community development practitioners, I think that's something really key that we can all strive to encourage. And I'm just going to share an example of when that's worked in practice. So I'll tell you a story about someone called John. That's not his real name, of course. So John was long-term unemployed. He didn't feel like he had any skills. He was a lone parent. He was in loads of debt and financial issues. And really, he was feeling pretty low. I mean, every time I spoke to him, he had just more issues, more problems, more challenges. And he just really didn't see anything he could do. He was pretty stuck, and so was I, because I didn't really know what to do with John at this point. But then something changed. We stopped talking about the issues that were in his life. We knew there was issues in his life. What we started talking about was instead what he was good at. So what was it that he was really excited about? What gave him passion? What did he enjoy in his life? And it turned out what we found is actually really liked woodwork and DIY and crafty type things. And actually, despite all the challenges in his life, he used to go home and build furniture, which I just thought was incredible. So actually, what we then looked at was actually how can you use those skills in a practical way? So he began volunteering. He found that he could volunteer for a charity where he could put those skills to use. And he also found that other people quite enjoyed his talents too. And before long, we had John volunteering 5 days a week, involved in a range of practical projects, teaching others skills, doing repair works at a community centre that couldn't afford repair works. And suddenly, John wasn't someone who was receiving a service. He was an active citizen delivering a service himself. And actually, he was sharing those skills with members of his own community. What really he gained from that was he became connected to others. He made new friends. He became physically active. And actually, he just became happier as a result. What it didn't do, it didn't take away his issues. It didn't make him out of debt. It didn't mean that he was, he found a job. But actually, what it did do is it improved his well-being, improved his confidence. It made him feel connected to his community. And I think the key thing with all of this is it came from John. It wasn't me. I didn't do anything. What I really did was I talked to him about what his skills and talents were, and I created an opportunity that he could use those. But actually, the rest of it came from him. And I think what this shows is actually when we focus on people's skills and talents, rather than the things that are holding them back, actually people have the opportunity to flourish and to really, get the rewards from that, which is, in John's case, just being happier. So I think that's just a practical example of how kind of, asset-based community development might unfold in reality. So now I was going to move on to really just a couple of kind of pointers and things that I found really useful in my career. And then I'll open it up to some questions. So the first thing, I think, when we talk about community, it's important to understand what we mean by community, because community isn't a single thing. It's not. It can be a place, but it can also be an identity. It could be values. It could be hobbies. It can even be your house. So I think the first thing is key is that a lot of us have more than one community, and we have communities that change over time. And I think that's really important because actually, it's recognising that actually we're not just I wouldn't refer to people as just being part of the Erdington community in my job. Actually, they might be part of the Erdington community, but they might also be part of the disabled community, or they might be part of a particular road, or maybe they're part of a particular faith. And all of that is important to understanding somebody's strengths and their assets. The second thing, which I think is really important, is that unlocking strengths can be challenging. We're not often used to just being told, tell us what you're good at. Sometimes people don't know what they're good at, and sometimes people don't want to tell you. And some people might feel embarrassed, maybe if no one's ever recognised their strengths before, maybe they don't realise the things that they're good at are actually really good things. So I think some people actually find it difficult to kind of to make that change. And I think what I found really helps with that is actually, active listening, exploring with people, understanding them, unpick what is it that is stopping them in their perception, what is it that's holding them back. And I think our role as community development workers is then how do we create opportunities so that people can explore and use their strengths. So could that be volunteering? Could it be workshops? Can it be just a conversation, a chance to explore things? And I know Fatima talked about kind of people with mental health issues, and actually, there might be issues around anxiety, depression, confidence, all sorts of things such as that. And actually, for those people that you're supporting at Mind, a large number of people may not feel ready to kind of explore those opportunities yet. I think the key thing is that consistency, is how do you keep supporting people on an ongoing basis to help them to do that. The next thing that I think is really important is that change happens one person at a time. So sometimes when we talk about creating community change, I imagine people imagine sort of big marches and people protesting and things like that. And although that may be an example of communities creating change, actually quite often you're really changing one person at a time. You're not necessarily always having kind of communities acting as a single cohesive block. Quite often you might just be having you supporting one person to do one thing differently than they've done in the past, because all those changes and all those conversations add up to a cumulative change over time. So actually, if you're changing the attitude or behaviour of one person, maybe that one person is going to go and help one more person, and you have a bit of a ripple effect. And I think how you connect people together is really important there too. The third thing that I think is really important is I think really it comes down to kind of your values and your behaviours and how you treat people. I think as much as anything, asset-based community development is a mindset, in terms of those conversations you have with people. I think for me, some of the key things that come out to me are actually not making assumptions about people, what people want, what people need from you, not being judgmental about people, and also just being really resilient, because actually working with people can be draining, particularly if sometimes people get angry, particularly if things go wrong. If someone tries something new and it fails, actually their anger is going to maybe directed at you. So I think it's that persistence, that staying with residents, in order to make that happen, because change doesn't always happen quickly. The next point I wanted to say is actually trust what you know works. So I think quite often, if you as a person have values, or your organisation has values, I think sticking to the things that you know work and that you know are right for your communities is really key. Quite often we deliver services to contracts. We all have funding which says certain things, but actually if the things that you know are really important to your service, make sure you tell funders about those things, not the other way around. And I think staying true to the things that you believe and the things that you value in your work is so important, because funding comes and goes, but actually you're always there for your community. If you might have a 2-year contract with a funder, but actually when it ends, the people you're supporting in your communities are still there. And it comes down to that position of trust, really, and you building up those strong relationships with communities. And penultimate point is really, I think, partnerships work. build up a wide network of people you work with. That could be other professionals, it could be volunteers, it could be community groups. What I found is actually when you work closely with other partners, things happen a lot quicker. And where possible, give more than you take. Don't treat partnerships as just a place where you can get solutions or you can promote your projects. Actually, what can you give to a local partner to make that relationship really strong? And I use partnerships in the broadest sense, because a partnership might be a small community group, it might not be a formal organisation, but actually all of them contribute to your wider networks of community development. And then I think really the final point is thinking about how do you take people from just merely surviving to thriving. So to me, actually, community development is a way to do that. Is actually how do we stop talking about the crises, the emergencies, the firefighting, and how do we help people to develop the skills and tools that they can really thrive in their communities. So to me, that's really what asset-based development, community development as an approach should help you as practitioners do. And I think I was going to leave it there and then over to any kind of questions and discussions, really.